Hi, everybody, and welcome to another info session. Today, we will be focusing on simplifying manual processes and go through some smart settings that could actually make a difference for you. And see, here we go. And before we start, if you did not attend the previous info session, then I would just like to inform you about this, that we are now Truvio. And this is because we are several different companies that now are unified under a shared brand, which then is Truvio. And this is some guidelines for the info sessions. Per usual, your microphones and cameras are turned off. That means that you cannot ask any questions verbally. If you have any questions, then please use the chat. And remember that everything that you write there, everyone can see. So please do not write anything private. If you have any questions that you are unsure about, then please contact me or your support. Today we might not have time to go through the Q&A, the questions, so please write them and I will connect with you after the info session regarding the question. The info session is recorded. This means that you will get access to the recording after the session. We upload everything to YouTube and we have a playlist with all of the sessions for the year now. And after the session today, you will receive an email, and in this email, you will get the link to the playlist, to the recording, and also specifically links to today's topics, so that you can easily access that in our online manual. I will talk about the settings today in ExFlow in Business Central. So this means that if you have an older version, you might not recognize this, or it might be a little bit different. So please keep that in mind. And the duration for this session today is 25 minutes. And this is where you find the chat. So up on the right, and then there's a little question mark. So please write your questions there. Okay, let's see if we can move forward in the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay, so the agenda for today. First, we will start with an introduction and talk about today's theme, which is then to streamline your work with smart settings. We will then go through 5 scenarios and some practical examples connected to this. And then it says frågor och svar here. That means questions and answers. So that's a little bit of Swedish for you today as well. And let's start with the introduction. So before we jump into the practical examples, I like to start by setting some context for today's topics. So when we talk about automation and efficiency in ExFlow AP automation, it's not really about automating for the sake of automation, but to reduce unnecessary manual work, and most importantly, to help you focus on the right things and put time on the right things. So what we often see with customers is that a lot of the time is spent on repetitive tasks. The same type of invoices are handled manually over and over again, and the same checks are performed multiple times and over again. And many processes still include quite a few clicks that could actually be automated instead. So today we'll focus on 5 settings or areas that can help reduce manual work and also to make your AP processes more efficient. And also, before we move into the practical examples, I would like to talk about this. What we see in many organizations today is that there's still a lot of manual work, as said, and it's often not about one big issue. It's about many small manual steps. And together, that takes up a lot of time. So if we look at the left side here, we can see some typical challenges in manual processes and with no manual automation. And the cost invoice is relatively high per invoice. Cycle times are long. Errors are more likely to occur, and finance teams are still spending a lot of time on those repetitive administration tasks. And this is exactly where automation and efficiency can bring a lot of value to you. So because automation is not about just doing things faster. It's also about creating more consistent processes, reducing manual errors, and also freeing up that time. And the important thing here is that improvements often do not come from one single large project. They often come from small, smart settings and improvements that is connected to your days, basically. And that could mean automating reoccurring documents from vendors, reducing unnecessary verifications, using smarter rules and features, or actually letting the system handle the standard workflows automatically. And that is exactly what we're going to focus on today. How relatively small adjustments can actually reduce your manual work. And that without losing the control that many of you want, because I know I hear that a lot, that you still want the control over things. And that might be why some still you do things manually. And on the right side here, you can really see the difference between manual processes and smart automation. And with that, let's take a look at today's scenarios. So here they are. We'll start by looking at how we can use automation settings for reoccurring invoices to reduce manual work in standard workflows. And then we'll move on to an introduction to some smart features that build a foundation for automation and efficiency. After that, we'll talk about something relevant to those of you who use order matching, and we'll look at smart order matching and tolerance handling, meaning how the system can help manage smaller discrepancies automatically instead of stopping the entire workflow for manual handling. And we'll also look how we can reduce verifications and those extra clicks by allowing certain changes to pass automatically while you still don't have the control over important changes. And then finally, we're wrapping up with a smart feature for month-end closing that can help prevent posting in the wrong period, for example, and that also gives you better control. So the first scenario here is automation settings for recurring invoices. You all get them, recurring documents from vendors, and this could be telecom invoices, leasing, rent. And even though these invoices are reoccurring, we often see that they are still handled quite manually. And the invoice comes in, someone imports it with a click and checks the same information again and send it for approval, and sometimes even post it manually. And that is where the vendor setup becomes very powerful. You do not have to activate these settings for all vendors. In ExFlow, we can use vendor-specific settings to automate large parts of the flow. So instead of doing the same things over and over again, then the system can do that for you. So here we can use settings such as automatically create documents. You find it under ExFlow vendor setup and then document creation checks, and it's called automatically create documents. And I will show you on the next slide where you can find this. And together with a purchase code, approval rules, or dimensions, this means that when a document from that vendor are received, you do not have to handle them manually in the port journal, and the documents are created automatically. They're coded automatically, approvers are added automatically, and the documents are then sent out for approval. And this means you do not have to spend administrative time coding and clicking and then creating the document. And we usually recommend to start simple. Choose a few vendors where the process is already stable and where you, for example, know how the invoices should be coded, who should approve it, and so forth. And as I said, you can also enable this setting here under vendor setup per vendor, but you can also activate it under ExFlow setup and then background processing for all vendors. But as I said, we recommend to start simple. So let's take a look at where you can find this setting in Business Central. So first, you search for ExFlow vendor setup. And then you choose the vendor you want to update, in this case, Microsoft. Opening the document creation part, document creation checks part, the section, and then you enable the setting automatically create documents. And if we mention another couple of documents here that you can use at a vendor level as well, meaning for selected vendors, we also have automatically post documents and automatically verify changes. And these are connected to how documents are handled in the approval status. So I recommend that you take a look at those settings as well. With that, let's move on to the next scenario, which is scenario number 2, smart features that build the foundation for automations and efficiency. And in the previous scenario, we looked at how you can automate the creation of recurring documents on a vendor level. But for automation to really work well and to take automation to the next level, the system sometimes needs some more information from other features or functions. So some users may still be entering a lot of information manually, and that's where you can use the features. For example, it can be references, projects, locations, facilities, and so forth. So one example is ExFlow reference codes. And with reference codes, we can use information that already exists on the invoice to automatically control things like coding, the approval flow, or who should be the first approver, for example. And when a reference is captured, that can actually be the first step towards a fully automated flow. So a common example could be rent invoices. The invoice may already show which office, location, or property the cost relates to. So then we can use that information as a reference to automatically connect the invoice to the right flow from the very beginning. We also have ExFlow purchase codes, and with this, we can predefine logic for different types of costs. So instead of users manually coding the invoice every time, you can add coding to this and use it. You can add dimensions, and there's so many things that you can add to it. And then we also have ExFlow contracts. And contracts can help standardize and further automate your recurring costs. And this is a great example of how something we talk about a lot at Truvio come true. So you should not have to spend time on the same manual steps over and over again when the system already has the information it needs to help automate the process. And with ExFlow contracts, then you can set up the rules in advance. You can define the applicable periods, amounts, approvers, and other relevant information. And when everything matches what you have set up, those invoices can pass through the entire approval flow without any manual handling. And together with the settings we mentioned previously in the previous scenario, the document can even be posted automatically. But we also know that control is important. So if something does not match or something deviates from the setup, the document will then stop in the import journal and you will see a warning message and there you can see why. And from there, it can be reviewed and then sent out for approval since something is off from what you set up. The third scenario is for those of you who use order matching, and it is regarding matching and tolerances connected to the order matching process. You can find this in ExFlow vendor setup or ExFlow setup. In the vendor setup, it's only for the vendors per vendor, and ExFlow setup, it's for everyone. And then you click on order matching. And what we see is that invoices get stuck in manual handling because of very small deviations. It could be just a few euros, cents, that differs. And one line may have a small deviation, or there might be a minor change compared to the purchase order, and then the entire workflow stops and requires manual handling. But here, the real question is, does every small deviation really need to be sent out to your approvers for handling manually? And this is where some of the smart settings here come in and can help you with this. So for example, we can define which deviations are actually acceptable. So instead of approvers manually handling every small difference, the system can then automatically approve what falls within the rules and tolerances that you define yourself. And this is actually connected to a very good example of something that I mentioned earlier. And we want you to work with the exceptions. We do not want approvers to spend time on approving things that already matched correctly. So for example, sending an entire document for manual review when one line is off, then we don't feel that that is good. So then this could be very good to use. So if we have a document where almost everything matches the purchase order, but one small part is different, then we do not necessarily want to stop that entire invoice, right? So for example, we may have several invoice lines where everything matches correctly, except for that one line, and it might be different by, I don't know, 10 euros. And in that case, we can use settings to control what the system is allowed to handle and what is allowed to handle automatically, to be specific, and what should actually be sent out for approval. And you can find this setting, as I said, under ExFlow setup for all vendors. Otherwise, you can go to ExFlow vendor setup if you want to configure them at vendor level. So this means that you can have different tolerances for different vendors. And the section highlighted in orange on the left here is where you define whether invoices should be approved automatically if the difference is within tolerance, or if the matched purchase order is already approved. You can also define a maximum amount for when these rules should apply. So for example, this could be aligned with your purchasing limits or used to prevent unusually large invoices from being approved automatically. And then on the right side, under line difference unit cost, you can define how much difference is acceptable then per invoice line. And both conditions here must be met. So you can see that it's a percentage and an amount. So for example, 10% and 10 euros. And the amount is based on the local currency configured in your system. And then in scenario number 4, it's about reduced verifications in approval, ExFlow approval status. And this setting, you can find it under ExFlow setup, under document posting checks, and it's called bypass verified changes. And as I said, this is connected to approval status, meaning we want to reduce verifications there, meaning the step where a document has fully approved and you need to verify whether any changes were made before posting. And with the setting bypass verified changes, you can create faster and smarter workflows. So what does this actually mean? Well, this feature allows approved documents to move directly to the status ready for posting by skipping the verification. You don't need to click that verify changes step. And this depends on which values or changes were made to the document. And simply explained, normally in ExFlow, let's say an approver changes something on the invoice or the lines, for example, such as cost center or GL account, then accounting must verify the changes before the document can be posted. But not all changes might be important to check. So for example, changing a dimension may be completely acceptable for you, but changing a GL account may still require manual review. And that's exactly where this feature becomes valuable. So you can decide which changes should be automatically bypass verification and which changes should still require your control. So instead of like having every change leading to manual verification, you get that certain changes are then automatically accepted, while your team can focus on like the important changes or high risk changes or exceptions and so forth. So this means less manual work, fewer clicks, and then faster workflows. And let's take a look at where you can find the setting. So first you go to ExFlow setup. And then under document posting checks, you find the setting called bypass verified changes. And once you activate this, a new setup will appear. And since I already have enabled this, you can now find the setting under related, advanced, and then bypass verified changes setup. And here you can see that I have configured 2 different things. For example, on the top on the GL account, I defined account ranges. This means that between these accounts, as accounts between these 2 are approved values, this means that those are okay to bypass the verification automatically. And then under department and area, you can see there's a little asterisk, a star. And this means that it does not matter which department or area that the approvers choose, and that all changes are okay and will be automatically accepted. And also one thing to know here is that if an approver creates a new invoice line and they use, let's say, any of these departments or area, This is still considered a change to the invoice itself because they created a new line. So even if they use these, it's still a big change. And this means that it will not bypass verification automatically. And the last scenario, here I want to talk about something fairly short but very important, and that's a smart feature for month end closing. And you can find it in approval status under actions and then functions, and then it's called batch update posting date. And because once you start automating more parts of the invoice workflow, then questions about control usually begin to come up, especially during month-end closing. So many of you want to automate your workflows while you still have situations where late invoices are automatically posted into the wrong accounting period. And this is where ExFlow then provides smart ways to control the automation. And a common scenario, for example, is when invoices are still waiting for approval when the month is closed. And in that case, you may not want those invoices to be posted in the old period once they are finally approved. And here you can use this feature, batch update posting date then, to prevent the late invoices from automatically being posted into the period that has already been closed. And as I said, you find it in approval status, you click on actions, functions, and then it's batch update posting date. And that was the last scenario. And what we really wanted to show today is that automation is not about automating everything. It's about automating the right things. And then most importantly, reducing your manual work where the processes are already stable. Because once you start combining several smart features, you can begin streamlining very large parts of the entire workflow. And that is really where the biggest impact comes from, because it's not just about one individual setting. It's not about how multiple features together can create a more efficient, controlled, and scalable way of working. It's about combining all of this together. And to tie everything together, I would like to end with an example of what a fully automated workflow can actually look like in API automation. And a very common example is reoccurring invoices connected to contracts or reoccurring costs, for example. So here we can use ExFlow contract, both to track expected invoices and missing invoices and amounts, and if you receive an invoice with too large amounts. And while also you can automate the entire document handling process. And the first step is setting up a contract in the system. And when the contract is created, a reference is also generated. And that reference can be interpreted directly from incoming documents and used to automatically connect the invoice to the correct contract then, ExFlow contract that is. And inside the contract, you can define rules for things such as maximum amounts, periods, tolerances, total amount of invoice, and other controls. You can also set up reminders if it's about to expire and so forth. And you can also connect an extra purchase code to the contract, because if everything on the document matches the rules when you configure this, you can activate automatic approval. And that means that documents does not even have the need to be sent out for approval, and the purchase code will then populate the line. You can then combine this with the vendor setting that we said earlier, automatically create documents during import, and that is when you really start getting a fully automated workflow. So then the invoice is imported, the document is created automatically, the contract is identified through the reference, it matches through the reference, and validation is performed against the contract and the rules you configured. And then lines are created, approvers are added automatically, and the document is auto approved because everything matches the contract, or if everything matches the contract. And if you have also activated automatically verify and post, then the document is posted automatically without a single manual click anywhere in this workflow. And also a great thing is that you can still track this document. So you can find it in ExFlow approval status history later. You can see dates, times, the document, that it was approved by the system, and so forth. And this is a really perfect example of today's most important message, that your time should be spent on handling expectations and not these kind of standard workflows that the system can handle and manage automatically. So with that said, you can automate entire workflows or part of the workflow at the vendor level per vendor or for all vendors. And you can use these smart features, functions, and settings to do that. And since we're running out of time, we're going to skip the questions and answers. And if you have written any questions, I will have a look at them and answer you per email later. And a friendly reminder, we have a documentation platform. Here you can see our manual, release notes, and more. There we also have some short video tutorials. But then we have these ongoing info sessions as well. And I also want to take this opportunity to briefly introduce one of our Truvio other products, which today is banking automation. And with our banking products, you can automate parts of the banking and payment process directly in Business Central. And the goal is to reduce manual work related to areas such as payments, reconciliation, and cash management. And instead of working across multiple bank portals or manual workflows or Excels and so forth, you can get more of the process and it can be handled then in one place directly then in Business Central. So this gives you faster processes, better control, and a clearer overview of everything. So if you see that you also have a lot of manual work related to banking, payments, and reconciliation, this might be something for you and to explore further. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to learn more. And upcoming info sessions. We have one more this spring. It's for our product expense management, and it's called Everything You Can Do on Mobile. And we will talk a little bit about AI and stuff that are related to this product as well. So please join that one. I will send you the link with the email so you can register. And if you have any questions or anything at all, you're unsure about something, please reach out to me. You can scan my QR code here. And if not, so if I don't hear from you, then we'll see you in the next info session. Have a great day, everyone.